Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished entrepreneur from San Diego, USA, Jyoti Mishra. Jyoti, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Delighted to be here.
Thank you. Jyoti is the founder of Neural Engineering and Translation Labs. She's an author of a children's book titled The Little Brain, and her research has been featured in the Time Magazine, Washington Post, NPR, The Hill, the World Economic Forum, Scientific American, among other popular media. So, Jyoti, for a lot of our viewers and listeners, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in the field of neural engineering and translation?
Sure. My journey, Ashutosh, started really early as a child in India. Growing up in India, my father was a pioneering neuroradiologist, and he did intervention procedures at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Now he's retired. And he was really one of the many pioneering clinicians over there who was able to cure problems with brain function with the kind of interventions that he did, except that there wasn't, at that point in time, he was so busy with patients, he wasn't doing much research and science with it. And I was always just very curious about how, the brain is coding what it's doing. And that's why I took up neurosciences as a career. And because of seeing patients from a very early age, I was very interested in being able to apply neuroscientific knowledge towards advancing mental health care solutions. As we know, mental health care still needs a lot of efforts in terms of technologies and precision and really advancing care for people around the world. And so, there's components that are needed with regard to engineering, as well as the basic biology. And together, that integration leads to newer experimental approaches that we are innovating.
Very interesting. And can you also explain what is human-centered neurotechnology and how are the solutions impacting society?
Yes, absolutely. So human-centered means that we create solutions that would be leveraging technology that will be informed by our understanding of how the brain works. And at the same time, we really think about how any given person is going to use that technology in their daily lives. And so we want to make it non-burdensome. We want to make the procedures rapid. We want to make them cost-effective. And so all of these practical considerations come into account, especially when we want to create solutions that are human-centered. So there's no burden in adoption of new tech.
And what are some of the challenges you have faced in developing some of these solutions?
And so development of these solutions requires a lot of knowledge integrated from many different fields. So like the term neural engineering suggests, you need a background in neurosciences and engineering. And at the same time, our group is into translation, which means that we don't stop at generating new technologies, but we also look into how they're adopted by healthy people and also by patients in clinics. So there's all this collaboration that we do with clinicians. And so there's a huge interdisciplinary team that comes together, and everybody needs to talk each other's language and really have a sense of mutual respect for each other, so that we can create something that's really has value and that people will use, and their mental health will improve over time. So I think creating that kind of cultural environment is very important. And when we first began our group, the main challenges were in integrating these fields together.
And can you give me an example of some of the work that you're doing related to neural engineering and translation?
Yes, so we've created one of the technologies that we have is a brain mapping platform. We call it the Brainy platform that is able to assess different aspects of brain function in terms of your daily life cognitive abilities. So cognition takes care of different aspects such as attention, how you process emotions, how you memorize things, how you process rewards or feedback that comes to you. All of these things are part of daily cognition. And it turns out that many mental health disorders have problems with cognitive processing.
Right.
So we created a platform that can measure these abilities and also understand the brain underlying them. So once we do that, we're able to deploy it in clinics and also in community settings and really figure out for each patient what is their specific deficit or their specific brain's need for improvement, and then use technology to target improvement in those domains.
And Jyoti, are there any limitations or risks associated with neurotechnology?
It depends on the invasiveness of the technology. So for instance, in our group, the human work is all non-invasive. So this is with sensors that are put on top of the head or with off-the-shelf smartwatches and phone apps that we develop. And so there's an integration of a lot of different off-the-shelf tools, but most of the technologies that we also innovate are non-invasive so that they can have more daily life adoption. Of course, when we think about serious mental illness, in that case, sometimes people also use deep brain sensors and stimulators that are put in with surgery. And so that has to have expert deployment, and that has to be very carefully monitored so that there are no side effects of those procedures.
And do you face any kind of skepticism or concerns when it comes to integration of your technology in people's daily lives?
You know, we really try to work very hard with community stakeholders, with clinician leads, and really try to have a buy-in from individuals before we are able to deploy tools into new settings and into people's homes. And most of the time, the patients need to understand that these are safe to use. They have been tested for safety. They have been tested for efficacy in the lab setting, and then only they're sent home. And so most of the time, there's not much pushback. And when there is any concern, it can be that there may be boredom or there may be fatigue from use, which may which may cause people to stop use over time. But because we can monitor that, we can also have conversations with patients as to what difficulties they might be having with technology use, and that information is actually really beneficial for us to then improve it in the next iteration.
Very interesting. And are there any ethical considerations that you need to take into account?
Yes, absolutely. So all of our work is under an institutional review board because it's under the umbrella of what's called experimental therapeutics. It's not the standard of care. So it's not an FDA approved methodology. So we work everything very carefully under approved ethical protocols. So patient consent is very important. And also we work with individuals to also provide them feedback about how they're doing from time to time. So whenever an individual asks for their information, we're able to provide that information to them. So I think as part of the ethics, it's important to have that human-centered focus again, that just like in medicine, we work with the principles of do no harm, we try to do the same with translational research as well.
Wonderful. And what do you do to ensure privacy and security of the data that you're collecting?
Yes, so the data is not shared with any other parties. They stay with authorized research personnel within our group, and that's part of the informed consent. Also, the platforms that we use are de-identified. What that means is that every person will get a code with which they can log in and access their information, but their actual personal information, like their names or emails or phone numbers, none of that is ever associated with any of the research data. So some of those kinds of steps help to protect privacy in the electronic environment. And if there's something that's done on paper, so paper kind of assessments, they're always kept in a locked and private spaces, just like a standard clinical practice.
Wonderful. My next question is that given all the work that you have done, are there any specific populations or groups that can benefit the most from your solutions? And how do you ensure inclusivity?
So I have had definitely a sense of predisposition, you could say, towards treatment of depression and related anxiety disorders because of experiences within my family and also personal experiences. So depression is actually a very common mental illness. 1 in 5 people will have depression in the world, and it has a very large socioeconomic burden. And and they're very high statistics, such that the numbers are actually going up after the pandemic and the current workloads as part of modern society. There's just a lot that can be done for curing the burden of depression and related mood disorders and anxiety disorders. So we really focus on that. We also do some work with attention deficit disorder. And so these are some of the psychiatric applications that we've made that really benefit from the technology tools, the non-invasive tools. I see a lot of mental illness is on a spectrum, which means that you can be a person who is really doing well and thriving, and then proceed slowly into a spectrum of mild symptoms to moderate symptoms to severe symptoms, and then back again. But so it's not like you jump from being completely normal to having severe illness. So having data to describe a phase that one is in and using that to treat that phase that the person is in, and especially providing empowering solutions in the space of behavioral health. So behavioral health is important for domains such as sleep, exercise, diet, social connections. The thing is, we all know that these things are good for us, but we don't have data-driven, precise solutions that meet our needs exactly. So we don't practice them well because they're sort of these common solutions that people are provided. They're generic solutions. So once we make them more data-driven, and an individual has insights and is empowered to sleep at a certain time, exercise at a certain time, what kind of exercise they should do, what kind of diet they should follow. All of these things matter because these are steps that one can take towards their own sustainable well-being. So I think we're trying to implement aspects of behavioral health within the treatment of depressive disorders, especially, and that's been really promising for us.
Wonderful. Thank you. My next question is that how do you balance the need for innovation and scientific progress with regulatory requirements? And I'm sure in this field, there must be a lot of regulatory requirements.
Yeah, so the different groups tend to work at different stages of innovation. So for example, we would come in at the very foundational level where we're generating new technologies, showcasing first use of these technologies, that they're safe and they're evidence-based, showing that they can be effective for treatment of any given mental illness. So say if depression is a focus, but then there's all these different complex tiers of trials, clinical trials that one has to do. One has to do controlled trials. So we do first demonstration with controlled trials, but then one also has to do randomized controlled trials across multiple sites. So not just our group, but then other scientific groups and other clinics are also adopting the same tools. And we do these long multi-site trials with a lot of patients and having all safety procedures in place. And only after that is regulatory approval obtained if all the results of safety and efficacy shown in these multi-step trials. So innovation needs to come with a lot of rigor, and all that together is then put forth for regulatory approval.
Thank you. And what role do you see government or policy-making institutions play in shaping the future of your technology?
Yes, I think the role of government partially is in sponsoring institutions like the National Institute of Health that provides funding for the kind of work that we do. And then also in the regulatory approval processes, if they're less bureaucratic and less burdensome, and if the right evidence has been shown, and if it passes approval, then it allows for better adoption by the public. And so there's definitely an intimate partnership with the regulatory agencies in terms of how the public is able to adopt new technologies, for sure. And sometimes that kind of regulation and needs to happen sort of instantaneously, as we're seeing with AI. A lot of governments are grappling with exactly how to regulate AI because it's a fast evolving technology. And it's the same, we use AI in our work as well. So precedents from prior regulations then help to guide our own work. But sometimes, I think it's very important that we work with regulators for proper use of technology, and especially so that it doesn't get into the wrong hands, it's not used for the wrong purposes, and there's responsible and ethical use by the consumer.
Well said. So I have time for two more questions. My next question is that what kind of impact do you hope to make through the neural engineering and translation labs in the long term?
So the NEAT Labs is really dedicated to scalable neurotechnology innovation for mental health care. We really think about creating technologies that are accessible and cost-effective and easy to use by a diversity of populations. We think about populations in the developing world as much as in the advanced places. Sometimes even cities in the United States are have technology access, but then the suburban areas or rural areas will not have technology access. So how do we make technology to be more equitable at the same time as being effective? That's all part of scalable solutions. And so we would like to advance mental health care solutions that are equitable. And I think that's our motto.
Wonderful. And my last question, and it's a more general question. Given what you see as your vision for your organization, how do you see the future of neurotechnology evolving? And what potential applications or advancements do you find the most exciting?
So I think neurotechnology does have a lot of potential in that it can help us understand how our brains function in a state of well-being as well as in the state of illness. And that insight itself is actually very empowering for us. And, you know, we all might have that kind of experience that, you know, sometimes when we're feeling down or when we're feeling anxious, we might blame ourselves. But when it has always been our observation that when we're able to observe a biological process, that it's not necessarily our feelings that are to blame. There's a specific biological process that's happening in our brain that's an objective process that needs to be corrected. That insight actually can be very empowering. And so neurotechnologies can have a very insightful role in shaping the future. In terms of, especially in terms of mental health care. And I think, there's a lot of promise. Currently, there are a lot of gaps in how mental health care is practiced and what we understand of neuroscience. And like the exciting potential is really in the integration of neuroscience, engineering, AI, and where it can help us to advance who we are as humans and how we think. Also, so I think the brain is really the most mysterious organ in our body. So the more insights we have about it, the more wisdom we have as a human race, and together, I think it makes us better. And so I'm excited about the potential for neurotechnologies in general.
What a great response. Thank you. And on that note, Jyoti, thank you so much for speaking to me about the whole world of neurotechnology. I mean, I think for me, everything that you said was a new learning experience. Thank you again, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.